I would suggest yeah. You're almost going to use this area, and after when you put it, so you see what the front much as goes away.
Probably. I almost cried yesterday. Like you're sad about what you said. Yeah, like whenever I was talking about like my personal experiences and stuff.
Okay, guys, I'm going to kind of get us settling in before we have our first presenter. I'd like to welcome you all to day 2 to the 2022 Honors Diploma presentations. We have a very full morning. We have 5 presentations this morning, back to back, one after the other. So we will be moving in a timely fashion and very punctual. Okay. A couple of things before we get going, in case you haven't been here before. At this moment in time, would everybody please silence your cell phones? I'll give you a minute to do that. Make sure, confirm. I should confirm too. Confirm everything. Okay. All right. Second thing. We are live streaming, so if you're sitting over there, your camera's right there, so please mind if you're talking to your neighbor or something like that, just be aware that we are live streaming, and avoid standing in front of the camera so that you don't block the presentation. And the final piece is, at the end of the presentations, the committee has an opportunity to ask questions. So after the committee is done asking questions, if the audience has any questions to ask, then they can go ahead and ask them as well, unless we've run out of time. Okay, so those are your variables there. Okay, are there any questions before we get started? There are some seats up here. If people in the back would like to come up, you're more than welcome to. Okay. All right, our first presentation today is Ms. Coral Jackson, The Power of Me Too.
Good morning, everybody. How are we doing this morning? Doing good? Thumbs up. It's nice to see you all here. Lots of familiar faces, and that's always nice. We're going to start off my presentation today by playing a little game, and I'm going to ask you guys a question. So, as you see, we've got 4 people on the screen today. We've got Reese Witherspoon. I know her best for Legally Blonde. Terry Crews, you might know him best for his 6-pack and dancing pecs. Salma Hayek, being Adam Sandler's wife in Grown Ups, which we all know she's way out of Adam Sandler's league. And Alyssa Milano, which Mr. Rogers informed me that a lot of you may not recognize her. She was in Charmed. It's a TV show. I guess the younger audience might not really recognize her as much. It's true, it's true. Alrighty, my question for you today is, I don't know.
On this side.
Nice. What do these 4 people have in common? Is it A, they are all vegan? Is it B, they have all won over 3 Oscars? Is it C, they have all joined the hashtag #MeToo movement? Or is it D, they have all adopted a child? Raise your hands for A. All right. Raise your hands for B. Okay. Raise your hands for C. Okay. And raise your hands for D. Okay. If you raised your hand for C, you would be correct. I assume the title of my presentation may have given that away. All of those 4 people have joined the hashtag #MeToo movement, because today we are discussing the power of hashtag #MeToo. My name is Coral Jackson. The #MeToo movement is a movement which started a conversation about sexual harassment and sexual assault in the film industry, in workplaces, and in schools, and maybe even in your own home. So my thesis and my purpose was to find a greater understanding of the effects of conversation on sexual assault reports, primarily talking about conversation within Hollywood and the uprising of sexual assault within Hollywood, and how our favorite celebrities talking about it brought it home for us to talk about. So in order to understand Me Too, we first have to understand the history of the movement. The movement was founded in 2006 by Tarana Burke, who was a sexual assault survivor who sought to create a program full of resources and help for healing, and to create a movement of people to show that victims of sexual assault aren't alone, that there are people of all genders, of all race, of all sexual orientation who are affected by sexual assault. Today, the movement website provides stories and testimonies from people all over the world to show the different paths towards healing. The website also contains hotlines, healing toolkits, and ways to be a supportive ally to survivors in case you know somebody who has been affected by sexual assault. The movement, however, did not gain its traction until 2017, when thousands of victims flocked to social media to share their stories using the hashtag #MeToo. The night Alyssa Milano, who you may have recognized from the beginning, shared the first viral tweet containing the hashtag #MeToo, around 200,000 tweets were shared throughout the platform that night. Here, so talking about the discussion on social media, on the graph, you can see that when using the term Me Too and using the term sexual harassment within tweets and articles, they ended up going hand in hand. And at one point, using the term Me Too surpassed using the term sexual harassment when discussing sexual assault. So it was used as an overall umbrella term when discussing sexual harassment and assault. The movement also launched an increase in reports of sexual violence and crimes. Within the first 3 months of the movement's popularity, there was a 7% increase in reports. Now, this may not sound like a lot, but that counts for over 4,600 reports, which in the long run, that's 406,000 people who have been affected by sexual assault. And just that slight increase so quickly, it really does show a lot. And it brings a lot of people forward. The hashtag also spread to 24 different nations globally, including the US, Sweden, and Japan. The movement stretched beyond barriers of race, gender, and class, and united victims of sexual assault. The movement also played a large role in accusations against some of Hollywood's biggest names. Most famously are the accusations against now infamous Hollywood director Harvey Weinstein. As of now, there are over 80 accusations against Weinstein, including accusations by Ashley Judd, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Rose McGowan. Now, the flood of these accusations created what is called the Weinstein effect, which is a term coined for the domino effect made against men of Hollywood following the accusations of Weinstein. So as soon as a bunch of women came forward against Harvey Weinstein, more women started coming forward against other men in Hollywood. Over 150 men were accused between October 5th, 2017, which was the date of Harvey Weinstein's initial accusations, and January 30th, 2018. That's 4 months of women coming forward in large groups and numbers to accuse some of the most important men in Hollywood. Some of these men include Kevin Spacey, James Toback, and former Today Show host Matt Lauer. Now, whether or not their perpetrator was punished, majority of women who came forward against these men claim to be really proud about coming forward and sharing their story and showing the bravery that it takes in order to face these people of power. They hope to have inspired others to come forward and to seek closure, justice, and help. Rosanna Arquette is a victim of Harvey Weinstein, and she blames him for sabotaging her career after she came forward with accusations against Harvey Weinstein. She had a lot of trouble getting jobs and getting casted in a lot of things, and her career really went downhill because of how much power that Harvey Weinstein as a producer in Hollywood had over the industry. She claims to understand the fear of being retaliated against, but she hopes that the small forms of justice for others will inspire more victims to come forward. Now, you're probably wondering why all of this stuff happening in Hollywood could affect us in Cortez. But the truth is that sexual assault is everywhere. It happens to anyone, it happens to everyone, and it does not matter who you are, where you come from, sexual violence is here. Statistically, 81% of women experience sexual assault in their lifetime, and 1 to 3 women claim to have faced attempted or completed rape between the ages of 11 and 17. Statistically, this means that you or someone you know has been a victim of sexual assault, and it also shows how often these incidents are swept under the rug and you don't hear about them, or maybe you have somebody and you didn't know that they're not going to tell you, they may not tell you that they've been a victim of this. They may not realize that they were a victim of sexual assault. You may not realize that you were a victim of sexual assault because it is so common and the traits are so small and it can happen so quickly that you may not realize this stuff. You're in Cortez, I mean your neighbors, this happens to your neighbors and your friends and family and sometimes even you. and it's inevitable. There's also a lot of shame when it comes to coming forward about sexual assault. Victims have been taught by society to fear coming forward with their stories because of guilt, because of the fear of retaliation, because of the fear of not being believed. According to Harvard Business Review, over 58% of women who have faced sexual assault say that not being believed is a major problem, and that frequently occurs when they want to discuss their experiences and their trauma. As a society, we need to stop ignoring the signs of sexual harassment and assault and create a space for women to feel safe and heard when telling their stories. It is also important to be more aware of sexual assault within Montezuma County because of our demographics and because of our population. As a town that borders the reservation, we need to realize that Indigenous women are 2 times more likely than any other race to experience sexual violence within their lifetime. Our neighboring states, New Mexico and Arizona, have the highest number of open cases for missing or murdered Indigenous women. And I think that Cortez needs to create a program to support all victims of sexual violence and to narrow the scope on what is happening on a local level and realize that sexual violence exists within our county. In order to do this, I think that Cortez needs to establish a sexual assault anonymous program to allow victims to come forward and to share their stories with people who may have experienced the same traumatic events as other survivors. This form of group therapy is similar to that of AA, or Alcoholics Anonymous, which has proven to be one of the most effective steps towards sobriety because of the group dynamic. Opposed to one-on-one appointments with a therapist, people are able to talk with others who know and understand what a person is going through. This also removes the shame and guilt associated. This would also remove the shame and guilt associated with sexual assault, because victims will be speaking to people who are also seeking healing and who aren't seeking judgment. I cannot say this word, the anonymity, the thing that happens when it's anonymous would also help coming forward, because it removes that shame. So my final thoughts, like I've said before, sexual assault happens to everyone, everywhere, no matter the race, gender, their socioeconomic class, or their sexual orientation. The Me Too movement created a conversation and created goals that are far from achieved, and the conversation is far from over. It should be something that is still being talked about within every workplace, every school, and just it should be talked about everywhere. I also wanted to talk about my biggest challenge within this project, which was finding statistics over testimonies, because when it comes to sexual assault, like, you want to come forward and have a face to your story, and you want to be the one to tell your story. You don't just want to be another number on a graph. And so there were a lot more like stories and testimonies of people coming forward versus numbers. And that was one of my biggest challenges. And there my works cited, and thank you. Questions, board?
So you suggest setting up a sexual assault anonymous program, which I assume would be some sort of like local organization. What do you feel could be done in the school system, K-12 or just high school, to help reduce incidences of sexual violence or assault?
I think just being more aware of different forms of sexual assault. I think that definitely among teens, a lot of teens do not realize that some of their actions may be considered sexual harassment, especially with social media. It's easy to be able to hide behind a screen and say this or that. And I think that as we're young people with feelings, really. We're trying to learn how to handle these feelings and whatever. I think that a lot of times, a lot of people may not know that their actions are harming people, or maybe their actions aren't just a little like flirt, and maybe somebody's actually really uncomfortable. So I think just teaching a lot more about the signs of sexual harassment and the different forms of sexual harassment would help limit it within our school district.
I got a related question. What is sexual harassment exactly?
I think that sexual harassment is like any inappropriate advances without consent, or inappropriate comments that, I don't want to say, I would describe it as any sexual advances without consent, or without, I don't want to say, because this sounds weird, but like without, you don't appreciate it, but it's like when, no, why would you say that to me? Or I don't want you being the one that you're not allowed to say that to me. You know what I'm saying?
I think a lot of dudes don't, which is the trouble.
Yeah. I think, yeah, just unwarranted comments and sexual comments and advancements, I think that's what I think it is.
Yes. The Sexual Assault Anonymous, is that a program that exists and is used in other communities, or is that an idea?
I'm not sure. Well, so within our...
Is your idea, or is it a program that exists like AA? And
as of now, it's, I didn't look into it being a thing in other communities. I mainly look to see what we have within our community. And we do have a lot of AA programs, a lot of substance abuse programs, but we don't have anything when it comes to the form of like sexual assault. Even when it comes to sex, really, we don't have a lot of stuff. So I mainly looked at it within our program, and just since that's something that we don't have, I thought that would be helpful. Yes.
So within Montezuma County, we have no programs or resources at all that are available for this sort of experience right now?
As in like the Sexual Assault Anonymous thingy, or just sexual assault in general? Because of course we have like, you can go and report your sexual assault. We do not have like therapy, like group therapy and programs like that for it, as of what I found.
Building a bit more on Ms. Mason's question about people's interpretation, there's almost a toxic climate sometimes that gets to people, and I'm wondering if there was a deliberate irony in your introduction when you chose to use objectification terms for the one male in your slides and not the three females.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. See, that's one of the things. You don't even realize that you're doing that. Like, I don't know, because when I first got up here, I was like, I don't have anything to say to these people. I mean, I said that Salma Hayek is also way out of Adam Sandler's league, which is, I think, like I said before, it's one of those things that's so subtle that you may not even realize that you're doing it. And maybe just now, I didn't realize that I was doing that. You know? Yes.
There's a program in Montezuma County for victims of sexual harassment, sexual assault. Newlings is also for victims of domestic violence.
Okay.
And they do provide intensive therapy for sexual assault victims.
Okay.
There's also, once it's reported through the police department, there's caseworkers who will meet with and assist victims of sexual assault. So there are resources here. It's just a matter of what avenue that you look for them and reach out to them. It's usually available after they've been reported. So your basis on the Me Too movement is, how do you think we can increase reports here locally to report instances of sexual harassment so they can use those services?
So your question is how to increase reports within Montezuma County. I think it's, well, so my thesis is that with more conversation comes more reports and more willingness to come forward. So I think that if people are more aware of those programs and that they do have those resources that they can look towards, I think that that would help a lot. I think that sexual assault and sexual violence is just it's a very hush-hush topic, and it's because of many different reasons, and it's something that you don't feel comfortable coming forward and talking about, and you may not feel comfortable reporting because you think that you were in the wrong, or that a person thinks that they did something wrong, or that they did something to deserve it, or anything like that. So I think it just becoming more aware, just kind of like I've been saying, just becoming more aware of sexual violence and its impact on people, and to know that you are not alone and that you can come forward and seek help and report it and get pointed towards the right paths and stuff. I think that would be the best way to increase reports, is just by letting people know that there are resources out there. Thank you.
Any questions from the audience?
Great job, Coral. I'm curious on if it's common for teenage girls to join the Me Too movement. I noticed that on the slide, it's mostly old people that are showing. It's like 10 years ago I had this issue. But are teenage girls still ostracized if they join the Me Too, or?
I don't think so. So a lot of the statistics that I found, like I said, like that 1 in 3 earlier, actually are amongst younger women. So I think that younger women are willing to come forward as well and to talk about it as well. It may happen later on in life. A lot of the women within the Me Too movement, although a lot of them were victims of Hollywood producers, a lot of them also came forward to talk about their stories when they were younger. Amber Rose, for example, she came forward, her story was about being assaulted in the 7th grade, and she went on to create a huge program in order to help other victims, and her assault was really early in her life. So, yes. I think that when you're younger, it's way scarier, I'm sure, to come forward, and you might not realize what happened until you're way older and something like that. But it still happens to younger people, and I do believe that they're still part of the movement as well, younger people.
Okay.
Thanks. Oh, yeah. Absolutely, yes. See, that's when it comes. Oh, I have your back. When it also. Go. Thanks. Okay, I'm sorry. Oh, wait. Here's a really dumb question. Yeah. Did you like that? Hi. Oh, no, that's okay. I was like, huh. I was like, what? And
It's okay. I'm sweating. I know, I gotta bring mine.
Coral, anything you wouldn't want to say to your parents?
That's what I would say. Yeah, and a lot of times they use it as like, oh, I'm just complimenting you. Like, would you compliment your mom? Would you compliment?
That's a good observation.
My mom keeps a nice outfit.
You know, read like your mom.
And I think like a really big part of sexual assault is coercion, which is really hard to recognize.
Yeah. Pretty girl. Okay, I'm gonna go in first before you know what heavy materials? I don't think. I mean, I'm going to. I saw her walk in. I was like, I'm really glad she was like, yes, I was really scared project. But then you kind of just, once you get in the flow. I'm honestly so glad. I really wanted to watch your. Thank you. No, it wasn't. All the seats are I saw the beginning of yours, and then I lost the surface immediately. Yeah, I just like waiting for you're the last one to go first. And then you get like yeah, so it's like probably have to yeah, it's like those platforms. Like that's what like I can't see. Is in there.
Okay, let's get ready for number 2 today. Ms. Shiley Graff is going to present Better Education, Less Stress.
Hi guys, my name is Shiley Graff, and today I want to talk to you about stress. To start us off, who here has experienced stress in the last year? Okay, that's a lot of hands. How about in the last 6 months? Again, a lot of hands. How about in the last month? A lot of hands. How about in the last week? How about today? Let's just throw that out there. A lot of people. Okay, that should account for about everyone in this room. Today, I want to give a brief overview of everything I'm going to be touching on. I want to take you through academic stress, how AP classes can increase the academic stress, how mental health is affected, and how to eliminate school-related stress in America. Common stressors for American high schoolers at home are financial instability, food uncertainty, unreliable living conditions, expectations or pressure from parents, and personal concerns surrounding insecurities and peer pressure. School-related stressors include tests, post-graduation plans, grades, uncertainty about the future and learning formats during the pandemic, and stress around missing important events like graduation or prom due to the pandemic. While my project was not focused on COVID, I thought it was a good idea to address the new stressors that students and adults face. This graph was created by the American Psychological Association, showing how teens aged 13 to 17 felt about their future in the wake of the pandemic. 51% said that planning their future felt impossible, and 50% of those students said that the pandemic severely disrupted their plans. The American Psychological Association also shows that 87% of Gen Z adults aged 18 to 25 reported that education is a significant stressor. 82% also expressed concerns for the 2020 to 2021 school year, and 67% reported difficulty with planning the future because of the pandemic. Now, I want to talk briefly about the free market and how it plays a role in academic stress. As many of us know, America's big corporations are obsessed with productivity because with productivity comes income. The free market requires well-educated employees, so there is a threat from businesses that if people are not educated, they don't get good jobs. The parents worry for their students, and so they put pressures on their students as well to ensure that they have a good future. This graph shows the relationship between income inequality and stress across America. As you can see, the larger red dots signify more stress in the area, and the darker regions signify greater income inequality in each region. An article written by Carol Graham, Sergio Pinto, and Julia Ruiz states that, quote, "the poor experience more stress than the rich in the U.S. This has a negative effect on the well-being of poor people, especially the mental well-being. Academic stress takes a toll on students mentally and can increase the chances of developing mental illnesses. According to a research article by Marissa L. Williams, these mental illnesses include anxiety, depression, PTSD, substance use disorders, and personality disorders. Stress not only affects mental health, but also increases the chances of risk-taking. These risks include unhealthy behaviors like using drugs, drinking, and using cannabis. There may also be an increase in sexual activity. These risks begin a vicious cycle of using these behaviors for stress relief, and then struggling more in school because of these influences, and thus leading to more risky behaviors. An article by Christopher Spani and Susan Wash discusses how parents' attitudes towards success can determine how involved they are in their students' education. There are generally two attitudes parents have. Some parents believe that success is related to ability, so they tend to be less involved because they either believe that their student does not have the ability to succeed, or they believe their student does have the ability and therefore does not need the support from their parents. The other parents tend to believe that success comes from effort, and they become more involved because they want to influence the effort that their child puts towards their school education. It is also important to note that students of all academic levels are impacted by academic stress, according to Catherine Trammell, the school-based therapist here at M-CHS. She said that students of all academic levels come to talk to her about stress, and it's not generally centralized around just AP students, although she did note that AP students tend to have higher expectations for themselves. In my research, I looked at some of the College Board's requirements for AP courses and tests. For example, the Physics 1 course consists of 7 units that are packed with information, most of it being algebra-based. AP English Literature and Composition has 9 units that focus on wide topics and has a lot of variety in learning. These include drama, poetry, prose, free response questions. While the plans created by the College Board are optional, teachers do have to be audited, and their materials that are presented have to be examined by college faculty. Now, you might be wondering, doesn't the stress students experience in school set them up for the stress they'll feel in the workforce? Unfortunately, this is currently true, because again, the workforce is obsessed with productivity, and they are, corporations tend to promote long work hours, and this impacts stress of workers. However, the 4-day work week can boost productivity, meaning that more gets accomplished in a shorter amount of time. If we focus on implementing this idea in schools and in the workforce, we can increase productivity, improve mental health while doing so, and also reduce academic stress. Catherine Trammell also noted seeing this same trend in our school and in our district since the start of the 4-day week back in January. Now, there are solutions to fixing the school system and even the workforce and eliminating some of the stress students feel. We can work towards promoting mental health and implementing simpler ways to take mental health days and focus on the well-being of yourself. An even better way of taking care of mental health is to actually implement and take on a lifestyle that includes time for mental health and actively takes care of the mind, therefore reducing the need for as many mental health days. In my interview with Catherine Trammell, I asked her if she had any solutions to lessening this academic stress in schools. Her response was the teaching of social emotional skills, starting at a young age. These skills can help students manage emotions, and these skills can also segue into teaching warning signs of stress and how to cope with stress. Catherine suggested simple, mindless activities and exercise. Another solution to our problem would be to consider the school system Finland employs. Standardized tests only happen every few years, and they are designed for certain age groups, so not every student has to take them. These tests also do more than just test memory. They test knowledge and understanding. Finland decided in 1972 that they needed to reform the old school system and started a program. You can see the name here. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm not even going to try. But this is a 9-year track, and after passing this track, 95% of students continue on to upper secondary school, even though it is non-compulsory. This non-compulsory education has 2 tracks. The first is general, and the second is vocational. After this, students can test into a university. The school system reduces competition between students because test scores aren't used to compare students to their peers. The Finnish system has the potential to be emulated in other countries to solve problems like stress. However, this system works based on Finland's social values. They especially believe in good quality education for everyone. So taking only a few elements of their school system would not create a feasible solution. We would have to implement most or all of the elements that they have. These components include student support, qualified teachers, same opportunities for education, few standardized tests, social support, and allowance for teachers to apply standards creatively, among others. As we can see, the American school system promotes stress and makes little effort towards reducing this stress. By making necessary changes to our school system, we can increase mental health and reform the workforce as well, and even increase productivity, if only first we focus on treating people like people. Is my work cited? Any questions?
Chicken or egg question. Is it the school systems or the economies that have created this monster?
That's a a good question. That is a very chicken or egg problem. I would say, my opinion would be the economy, because as we know, education has a long history and not everyone was entitled to have access to education in previous centuries, and yet there was an economy during those times as well. So the implementation of the newer school system and the school system that includes all students, especially in America, would be based more on economy.
A follow-up, you mentioned the Finland system a bit. One of the more notorious school systems stress kids out things in recent history was Japan in the 1980s. Did you touch upon any of that in your research or find anything about what had happened there?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on Japan. I just didn't have the time to do that, and I couldn't fit it into my presentation very smoothly. But I definitely did want to look into Japan, and I think I will continue looking into that.
So a lot of people say that there's some stress is good. It promotes growth, kind of like what you're experiencing right now. Can you speak to that? Because if we go with all stress is bad, then that piece gets lost.
Yeah, that's actually something that Catherine Trimble also covered when I talked to her. She said that some stress is good, but we do have boundaries as humans. When we have too much stress, it causes, there's not as much growth at a certain point, and it can just be damaging. So she did make a point to that, and I do think that stress is important. Some stress is a good thing to feel, but excessive stress like the school system is putting on our students is not the answer.
Did you happen to talk to any students here at the high school about how stressed they are, or what our students here at Montezuma High School feel their stress level is?
No, I didn't talk directly to students, other than just my friends, people that I interact with on a daily basis. People expressing that they do feel stressed constantly just because of all their schoolwork and making decisions for their future. So I have talked to some students in that way, but not necessarily for my research. However, whenever I did talk to Catherine, she said that the majority of her students come to talk to her with stress-related issues.
So you had said in the last year's study, 87% of students had educational stress, right? Did you look at that from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, what those numbers have changed or not changed over the years?
I did find some a graph from 2007, I believe. I decided to scrap it because it is pretty outdated data. But the stress levels were still pretty high. I don't know if they were 87% high, but they were, I think they were at least up in the 60s.
How do you suggest we as teachers or us as a school go about doing social emotional learning?
That's a good question. I think that social emotional learning needs to start in kindergarten. We need to start teaching our children to, and not saying that we don't do this already, because I think we do, but focus more on how to treat others, how certain emotions feel, how to deal with those emotions, especially ones that can negatively impact us: anger, sadness, anxiety. We need to talk about these things to increase knowledge about that and to allow them to function at a higher rate and function better in society. And that needs to start in kindergarten and continue all the way through. I think the teachers could really just work on just focusing on teaching students how to deal with those things, especially when conflict arises, because conflict arises in classrooms all over. And using those experiences and those occasions to teach how to deal with the emotions that students are feeling can help their coping with all of those emotions.
How do you respond to the people that think teachers should just focus on their curriculum? In fact, I think there's a law that's getting on the books or in the books somewhere, I think in Florida somewhere, that says, I think they cite math teachers specifically that you should only teach math and no social emotional learning. What's your response to those people that think the teachers should focus on their material?
I think that those students aren't making as much of a connection with the material or the teacher because they are strictly being lectured at and told to do your homework and do your worksheets, and there's basically being told just focus on the curriculum, don't focus on interpersonal relations, and interpersonal relations are really important in life beyond school, whereas I don't think that I'm ever going to use the quadratic formula again. I'm sorry to say that, but I don't think I am. So,
Period.
You learned so because your relationship.
yes, I think that relationships
We're
help.
just angry. Just angry.
Any other questions?
Audience?
I have a question. So I know that your project was mainly focused on the mental health of the students. However, our teachers do create the environment in our classrooms, so do you think, and they are overworked and underpaid, so do you think focusing on teacher mental health as well would benefit this?
Yes, it would. I did not get into this with my presentation, but I do think that improving the mental health and the stress levels of teachers would also have a great impact on students because students see the way their teacher acts, the way their teacher performs, basically, and they emulate that. I mean, they're around these teachers for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week mostly. They're going to feel all of these effects, and I think that improving mental health in teachers as well would be a really good way to help that as well.
Tell us how much you're going to use the quadratic equation.
Did you talk to Nurse Teresa von Sanchez at all? And does she see any students for anxiety and stress? No.
I did not talk to her. I should have because that would have been good. I just talked to Catherine because she deals more with the mental side of things as well. So, yeah.
How do you think like being a capitalist country affects all these levels of stress?
Yeah, so being a capitalist country, again, we're really focused on productivity and producing services and making materials and making money. And this really leads to less caring for employees. We don't treat people like people, we treat them like services. And I think that we need to focus treating people like people to fix that. Yes.
Did you look into how like extracurricular activities and like after school events may either like benefit or like damage mental health, like if they help or hurt more than?
Yeah, I really wanted to talk about extracurriculars, but I didn't find a way to implement it into my presentation. But I do think that in some ways, and I haven't done the research, but I think that in some ways extracurriculars can give students a place to decompress, a place to make connections with friends, and create more of a community. But I also think that having to juggle all of the extracurriculars and schoolwork can get really difficult and can actually increase stress too.
Anybody else? No?
Don't worry, Mr. Code. Your atmosphere to class is great.
Look up the quadratic equation and use it again.
Just the content. I'll use the content. You're gold. All right.
You want to talk about
Yes, I'm going to say it now. I'm still. Dude, no, I was being sad. I was like, the relationship that we have with her. I don't know. I'm gonna.
Better call Mr. Coda when you use the quadratic equation.
Go. You seem the least nervous. Yeah, you didn't seem very nervous at all. I didn't see that. We should all move to Finland. Where's the... You can't get through. I'm trying to text them. Come on. Okay. Yeah. They know what they're doing. Yeah. They know what they're doing. No, they're like number one. If you do something, you should be made happy. I want to see Grace. Okay, well, you really I teach English. There's really no relevance in what I teach. I'm in cultural heritage. Yeah, that's all it's like. I mean, like, English is the greatest language, and this guy is the greatest because he speaks English. Yeah, we teach this. You have to talk about it. You have to.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, that's problem. I need to clean my back. And you don't need to know how to run that cotton gin. How to run that cotton gin. That's why you sleep on my belly and I hate Oh, deeply. It's problematic. Most certainly. Yep. Which is one of the reasons why we're desegregated course. A break for Of course, you still have a lot of
It's my fault.
Oh, right.
And stats.
You scared me.
Are these peanut butter? Are these Rolos?
Goldfish.
Cool.
Yeah, I am.
Where'd you get the goldfish? I need to go my goldfish. Yes. But no, I just kind of excuse me.
I couldn't eat it beforehand because I would have thrown it out. But I ate after.
You want flavor blasted or rainbow? I'm not picky. You can do rainbow too. I want flavor.
I like that.
You want? Oh.
What do I want?
There's some what are these called? I forgot. They're good though.
Rolos.
Rolos.
Rolo.
Roll your boat.
You're scared.
I'm scary. I want these Oreos. I don't want Oreos. Yeah, you can have them. Okay. I also kind of want a cutie.
Which one? The raspberry? Pomegranate.
VIP section.
I mean, Sam's alligator. That's one of those things I just like to do something. It just plays.
Okay, before we get started again today, I'd just like to remind you to please silence your phones. So if you're new in the room, please silence your phone, and also be aware that we are live streaming from the back corner over there, okay? All right, so our next presentation, Our Plastic Paradise by Grace Shepherd.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, my name is Grace Shepherd, and I'll be presenting on Our Plastic Paradise. So plastic is one of the worst forms of solid pollution in our environment. We all know and we've seen the devastating effects it has on our ecosystems. However, we have distanced ourselves from the problem because it seems so far away, out of sight, buried in landfills, and rolling through open ocean. Unfortunately, unwanted plastic is haunting us in a form naked to the human eye, also known as microplastic. When plastic breaks down, it doesn't chemically decompose like other materials do. Instead, it turns into tiny pieces of its original self known as microplastic. This means that all plastic that has ever been created is still on Earth today. Microplastic tends to accumulate persistent organic pollutants, which are chemicals that when ingested remain in an organism's fat tissues, which over time can build up and cause health problems. In a process known as biomagnification, microplastic consumed at the bottom of the food chain will build up to the top of the food chain. In an oversimplified example, think of a small fish eating 5 pieces of microplastic. And then if a bigger fish comes and eats 5 smaller fish that also ate 5 pieces of microplastic, that larger fish has now eaten 25 pieces of microplastic. If a bird comes by and eats 5 larger fish, that bird has now eaten 125 pieces of microplastic. All things travel up and collect into the top predators. Unfortunately, we are those top predators. Eating fish is not the only way that we ingest microplastic. It is found in the soil, the water, our air. It is estimated that a human will eat about 44 pounds of plastic in their lifespan. The biggest concern, however, is that microplastic isn't going through our digestive system like other foreign materials would. Microplastic has been found in the spleen, the liver, kidneys, lungs, brain, and even placentas of humans. The chemicals found in plastics are linked to a wide range of health problems, such as obesity and infertility. When found in the brain, microplastic can cause cell death. Scientists are still unsure about the full extent at which microplastic can harm us. However, we can no longer be this comfortable allowing plastic to be this invasive. So in attempts for me to try to alleviate some of the plastic use locally, I tried to switch our utensils that we use in the cafeteria from plastic to biodegradable ones. And unfortunately, I was unable to do so, and here are some of the few reasons why. So all of our food and our flatware comes from Labatt. However, Labatt does not source biodegradable flatware. Our school is in a 3-year contract with Labatt, meaning that we can't exit out of that even if we wanted to. However, by the end, even if we did exit and go to another food source service, other services that we've used in the past or that are available to us also do not supply us or do not support biodegradable other materials that are not plastic. So one thing I asked is, well, what can we do? And when I was talking to Victoria Dennison, she's the lunch lady, she was like, well, we do outsource sometimes, not from Labatt, and this is because Labatt sometimes can't service everything that we need. And some of those things are parfait cups and the grab-and-go boxes. And I was like, oh, so since you can outsource those yourself, why can't you get paper ones or something that isn't plastic? And the biggest concern was, how will we sell our parfaits if students can't see the contents on the inside? And I was like, this is so sad. You can't use a paper cup because students won't be able to tell what's inside. You can't just write it on the outside. You know, they're trying to sell a product. So since that didn't work, here are my other solutions on how we can reduce plastic. We can ban plastic, we can hold corporations accountable, and we can spread consumer awareness. Banning plastic. So banning plastic is complicated because of its use in the medical field, in food safety, and for other general conveniences. With this in mind, plastic products should be banned based off of these 4 categories: the necessity, consumer lifespan, recyclability, and replaceability. So for necessity, this determines on how useful a plastic product is. Thinking of blood bags, needles, gloves, anything used in the medical field, those have a high necessity versus a Starbucks cup or your utensils don't. Consumer lifespan refers to how long a plastic product is used before it is thrown away. A Starbucks cup, for instance, has a consumer lifespan of 13 minutes before it is thrown away. versus maybe these tables and chairs that are made of plastic will probably use for 20 years or more. Recyclability refers to how easy a plastic product can be recycled, even if it is recyclable, like soda bottles are very recyclable. People don't recycle them, or they have like leftover juice on the inside that makes them hard to recycle because they can't be recycled. So even there's other things too that just can't be recycled. And then replaceability refers to how easy can a plastic product be replaced by something else. So the easiest plastic products that we can ban would be plastic products that have a low necessity, a low consumer lifespan, a low recyclability, and they're easy to replace. So is banning plastic possible and effective? And yes, over 80 countries have a full or partial ban on plastic bags, just plastic bags so far. In California, plastic bags eliminated over 40 million pounds of plastic carryout bags. Unfortunately, this was offset by a 12 million pound purchase of trash bags. This sounds bad. However, 28 million pounds of plastic were still eliminated in total, meaning that the mindset of people who used to use plastic bags changed. They no longer deemed plastic bags as a necessity. So banning plastic in the future. Currently, most countries are still focusing on banning plastic bags, and with good reason. They have a low consumer lifespan. They follow all those terms that I listed before. But there needs to be more push for other plastic things. And some countries are doing this. They're starting to ban single-use plastics such as utensils and like to-go boxes. But you know, it's a slow roll. In the future, it will be easier to ban plastic because certain things that we currently deem as necessary or certain things that we don't have replacements for will become possible in the future. Also, legislations will become more strict and more people will demand change. Now, our second solution is corporate accountability. Ever since the scandals of the Industrial Revolution, we have been holding companies accountable for their actions, and plastic should be no exception. Currently, plastic is the cheapest and most versatile material available to a corporation's disposal. They will want to use plastic for as long as possible, which is why there needs to be reason for corporations to move away from plastic. One of those being is subsidies and tax breaks, and taxes and fines, also known as the carrot and stick method. So before we talk about taxes, we need to first talk about price versus cost. So price is the amount of money that a person will buy something at the store. Cost is the actual amount of money used to make that product. The environmental cost is the amount of money required to create, or the amount of money required to offset the environmental damage that that product creates. Plastic is cheap because corporations do not have to pay for the environmental cost of making plastic. The price of plastic products does not match the environmental cost. Therefore, the corporations aren't paying for it, the consumers aren't paying for it, the environment is paying for it. So now keep this in mind when moving forward. Taxes and fines should be high enough to reflect the environmental cost when we place them on those plastic products. However, I do recognize that these will increase the prices of our regular day products, which means that we can't force these taxes onto necessities like bread, milk, eggs, butter, baby formula. However, these taxes should highly target soda, chips, other things, luxuries that aren't as necessary. And those taxes on those should be much higher to offset the balance of the taxes that aren't high on the necessary, or on the products that we do need to use. In the beginning, plastic taxes should start off light, but as time goes on, plastic taxes should increase to promote the switch away from plastic. Corporations should be fined for creating plastic products that cannot be recycled, like paper cups with the plastic on the inside, you know, those kind of things. And plastic lining or milk cartons that have like metal, plastic, you've seen those, like those can't be recycled at all. And then over time, these fines should become more strict and more demanding. On the other hand, we have tax breaks and subsidies. Companies who create plastic products, or plastic-free products, or products that use 30% or more recycled plastic should have tax breaks and subsidies. Plastic-free products are typically double the price of their plastic counterparts when I was looking at different things online and such. However, tax breaks and subsidies can help these corporations that are investing their time and money to create these new products, can help them create their products to be more cheap and more available to everyone. Now our last solution is consumer awareness. And this is the part where you guys come in. Things that you can do to spread awareness is voting on bills that reduce plastic use. You can avoid buying or using plastic whenever possible. I mean, when you go to the grocery store and you put your vegetables in that little plastic bag, you don't need to do that. The cucumber will be just fine sitting in your cart by itself. You can create or like content that you see on social media that spreads the importance of not using plastic, and you can talk to your friends and family about how invasive plastic is. The other unfortunate side of things is that right now us consumers don't really have a choice on the matter. You don't have the option to live plastic free. During this, I researched a little bit about zero waste lifestyle, which has become a trend. And in the zero waste lifestyle, those people try to avoid plastic as much as possible. However, some of the lengths and extremes they have to go to avoid plastic were insane. Most of the time, it's like you either choose to buy it with plastic or you don't buy it at all. Other things, like I know one woman, she was talking about how she didn't want to buy bread from the store because all of it came in plastic. So instead she baked bread at home. However, the yeast that she bought from the country that she lived in only came in plastic. So she had to choose the lesser evil of plastic, but she still had to choose plastic in the end. Things like this, also plastic-free products are much more expensive than your regular products, also make it very difficult for consumers to buy plastic-free products. This is why through consumer awareness we can change the market and create a new market for plastic-free products. New and niche industries like plastic-free products can start off very expensive and exclusive. However, with time and investment, products become cheaper and easier to make. This has been the trend for organic food, renewable energy, and eco-friendly products. 25 years ago, organic food was non-existent in commercial stores. However, now every time you go to a grocery store, you see that every single food has its organic counterpart. Overall, organic food prices have also dropped over time, making them easily accessible for everyone to use and eat. Plastic products can follow the same trend as long as us consumers demand it more. Things that you guys can do are starting to buy plastic-free products if you are able to. Maybe your razor that you use that is plastic, maybe you can go and buy a razor that has replaceable razor shells in it, or just different things like shampoo bars, just supporting these businesses that are already starting to create plastic-free products are some things that you can do to start support them and create the trend of making plastic-free a better alternative. Like, I hope that in the future, instead of saying like all organic or cruelty-free, those kind of things, it'll be plastic-free, like this is 30% recycled or things like that. Plastic is preventable, however, it will take action from all fronts to complete. Change in all things is sweet. Thank you.
Okay, question. On one of your very first, it was the very first slide with the visual, and there was something about a nurdle. What is a nurdle?
So nurdles,
the one right before this one. Oh, or no, yeah, nurdles.
Yeah, so nurdles.
Right, what's a nurdle?
A nurdle is a piece of plastic, so these are like what they use to make plastic products. So they'll have, like, it's like beads, and it's like, it starts off you have all these nurdles, and then they use the nurdles and melt them down to create other plastic products. The website that this came from, it was called the Nurdle Hunt, where you go and you search in the oceans, and you'd be like, hey, I found this nurdle, and then you record it, and then you keep it. But nurdles are the same thing as plastic. It breaks down the same way, and that's why I used these diagrams, because they really explained how it builds up over time. Yes?
I really enjoyed your explanation of biomagnification, and it got me thinking, is ingesting microplastics, is this more of an issue for meat eaters, or is it also an issue for non-meat eaters?
If you eat fish, there's a lot higher chance. I mean, we've all seen the thing, pregnant women don't eat fish. So fish is like a much higher risk. However, microplastic is in the air, you're breathing it in. So I think generally speaking, unless you know exactly where your meat is coming from, or where your food is coming from, there's probably microplastic in it, in your bottled water, in anything. So I don't think it really matters too much.
I got one for you, Grace. So I try not to use plastic, right, it's the whole thing, and I find that I wash a lot more stuff. So did you do research about the offset between single-use plastic and water use?
No, but I did briefly mention, so that part, I guess it's not here, the part where the Californians, they started to buy the plastic bags because they realized they wanted their tiny little plastic trash bags instead. So every single thing that we do ban, there's going to be an offset where consumers are going to be like, I still want to use something to do this thing. And I think with over time, people will realize that certain items aren't necessary anymore. Certain things that we have to do, aren't necessary to do anymore. Like like those people, they realized they didn't need to use plastic bags in their little tiny trash cans anymore. They just probably put them in their big trash cans, or they just put it in the dumpster altogether and not use them. So I think that's going to be the direction. I hope that it takes, but yeah, it is a cause for concern. However, I do think that using more water, using other things will be better in the long run than plastic, because plastic, we have to stop it now. There's no alternative. Versus water, it comes back around, you know. Trees grow back. Everything is pretty much renewable besides plastic. Yes?
Question about subsidies. Did you research how subsidized the plastic or petroleum industry currently is?
Yes. So that was one of the scarier things, is that they're already being subsidized, and like plastic industry. So I was thinking that we can remove those that we currently have and start helping subsidies to those those corporations that are creating plastic-free products, giving those companies subsidies instead.
Did your research reveal how many new plastic plants have actually been constructed recently because of this subsidy, and shift from gas-burning cars so they can still make money with their product?
No, but that is a big cause for concern, I would say.
In one of your diagrams, you showed about how the consumer power of choosing to buy organic has driven down price. Did you look into the alternative to plastic to say that people still want to have like some clear, unbreakable container, but is there like a biodegradable option that's getting promotion?
Since plastic is so widely used, there are different things, different solutions, different replacements for each plastic product. For containers, I think instead of, like, the other thing too is mainly focusing on not using single-use plastic. So these plastic chairs, they're going to be used for 20, 25 years, maybe even longer. A plastic container that sits in your house will probably be used a lot more than a single-use one. However, I've seen things like people use, they grow their own loofahs for like loofahs instead of the plastic loofahs, or they use the razors that you can switch in the blades once they get dull. There's been like floss that's made out of bamboo. There's bamboo toothbrushes. There's a whole array. However, these things aren't just popular yet. You can only buy them online, or you can only buy them in stores that we don't have in these rural areas.
Is there anything we can do about the maybe potentially scary amount of microplastics already in our bodies?
Currently, that was the big thing, is that we don't really know how to combat that except prevention, and that's where my approach was, is the prevention. The one thing that I looked at, paper that I looked into, it was about the microplastic being found in the placenta of multiple women after they given birth. That one, basically at the end, they were like, we found it, but we don't know why it's in here, what it can do, what damage it did do, we don't know. And that's the scariest part, and we don't have solutions for it yet.
Did you find any research about biodegradable plastics?
I don't think so. They usually just have biodegradable like materials that kind of resemble plastic, but aren't actual plastic.
Since your research, what changes have you made to your personal life in regards to using plastic?
So I feel really guilty because you forget sometimes. Like I go to Taco Bell and then I get, oh, I want a water, and then I'm like, I forgot it came in a little plastic container. I know my mom, she started buying like for her cleaning. She was like, I have these renewable cleaning bottles so that we can make. They're made of glass, so we can refill them. But yeah, I've been a lot more focused on that, and it.
Conscientious.
Mm-hmm. That's the biggest thing, is that once you become conscientious, it's hard to not feel guilty anymore when we use plastic.
Audience?
Copes.
As Americans, we will always choose cheap and convenient over healthy and not. So maybe the direction, what do you think about the direction of starting to put labels on things like we did with cigarettes? Because we were pretty good, even I stopped smoking. You know? And we were pretty good at getting people to stop smoking by connecting very specific health concerns to the use of tobacco. Can we do that with, I mean, are there clear-cut connections between the consumption of plastic and health concerns? Can we follow that direction?
I think so. One of the things that I didn't bring up, but when we were talking about fines, I was also talking about making labels and making accredited labels that say this is 100% plastic free, or labels that say this contains plastic in this product. Things like that, that consumers can look at and be like, oh, maybe I don't want this product anymore. Kind of like labels on the cigarettes. I do think.
But we need to connect them to specific health concerns, not just, oh, this is plastic free. Because if it's cheaper over here, I'm still going to choose that one. But if I know that that's going to give me Alzheimer's in 10 years or less.
I think more research is needed. The studies I found have come out in 2021, 2020, where they're just finding plastic in the human body. So I think we need more connections to the actual health detriments. However, I think all of us can agree that it will not be good once we do find out the exact health problems it does cause. Avery?
I have a water-based question, kind of like Ms. Mason's. So as we all know, Lake Powell is very low right now, and that provides a lot of water for California and Arizona. So a lot of people living in those states have to choose, like, oh, do I wash more like containers, or do I use more single, like, use plastic bags? What would you say to those people?
Wash more containers.
Yeah.
Like I said, in the long run, it's so much better. Not to mention, we could also reduce our use of water in our yards, in our golf courses. Why do golf courses need to be so big and use up so much water? Why do pools have to exist? Why do these other things that are taking up water have to come first before plastic?
There's also the amount of water that's used in the production of plastic, which is
Yep, that's true too. Yes, Coral.
I kind of have a question and then a piggyback question, maybe. First one, did you look into our recycling program in Cortez?
No, but I do know that it's bad.
It's bad.
It's not good. My family recycles, and I remember in Connecticut when we used to recycle, we dumped literally anything recyclable in a giant, it looked like a trash can, or like one of like the big trash cans, and it just took it away. We have to organize it and carefully tuck it in the bed and take off the caps on all the bottles. It's not good.
So with all the second question, with all of those like little loopholes and things that I know in Cortez, like there are a few because all the plastics are numbered, and there are a few numbered plastics that they just don't take, Like you said before, if it has some extra soda in the bottle, if the cap is still on, if the wrapper is still wrapped around it, they just won't take it. So do you think, I don't want to say like that it's like all the effort, that it's worth it, that like it is actually working? Because you put all this effort in, or at least like the person, they think they're putting all this effort in, and then in the long run, and it's like, oh, we didn't take that, we can't take that, we won't use that. It'll be back in the landfill.
So before I moved on to what I am now doing, originally my project was on recycling.
Yeah.
And I was wondering why certain things we don't recycle. And before the COVID pandemic, we used to ship all of our recycling materials to China where it got recycled, hopefully, who's to say. It did. Except they kept up the recycling, they didn't tell people to stop recycling because they wanted to make sure that the mindset of recycling was still in us, and so that people wouldn't just stop because our hold on. Then after COVID, we stopped shipping all of our recycled materials to China, so we no longer had a place to put our recycled materials. So instead of ending the recycling, they were like, we're gonna just not tell anybody, and we're gonna keep them recycling, thinking that things are getting recycled until we build better recycling facilities. And I think that is good because we still should be trying to recycle, but it's important to know that it's a lot better to not use it in the first place than to recycle.
Okay, let's leave it there. We're running out.
All graduated.
So guys, we're gonna have a real quick turnaround here. So stand up, go like this.
I'll take the chimney whenever you go through it. I'll have more Oh, I'm straight. The food's okay.
That's more food?
Well, everyone knows about our monthly market. Yeah, I was thinking about how to make it, and I was like, people
it's a farmer's market where everything's free.
I'm Grace's dad. Oh, cool. They did some research with women and talking about how they found ways to open your chip bags because there's so much that sheds off. Like, you have your fleece, that it sheds off, and so it's not just vegetarian.
Yeah.
I was about to ask you about like.
Think about that. I'm Andrew, by the way. I'm Did that make you guilty? Yeah. Oh no. Better just take one of these. You think there's more plastic in this? Yeah, probably. You're probably eating so many microplastics. Probably not helping. These are getting weirder. Okay. Stick with it away.
Ooh, that was another thing I was going to ask about COVID. We had to come up with so many single-use plastics for COVID. No, I think you're the same one. I think you're the same class. Thanks. I wanted to ask you. I know. Yeah. That's one of the reasons I saw. Maybe just like it's not releasing.
Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and try and get us started here again. Our next presentation is To Serve, to Protect by Savannah Story.
All right, can you hear me all right? Yeah. Okay, perfect. My name is Savannah Story, and today I would like to talk to you about corruption in military investigations and sexual assault prevention that they currently have. So to start off, every day since we were kids, I know that I've always been told, you know, respect, you need to have a lot of respect for your veterans, you know. You need to tell them every time you see them, you know, thank you for your service, because they're constantly defending our freedom and our future. Now, what if I were to tell you that actually our men and women, our sons and daughters, our sisters and brothers are under attack in their own system, and they are constantly facing sexual assault and just violence in general. And a lot of this is due to a serious issue in the corruption of the investigation system and of sexual assault preventative policies. So first I'd like to introduce you to Private First Class Lavinia Johnson, and she was stationed in Iraq in 2005. She was declared dead on the 19th of July in 2005 in a contractor's tent where they found her body, and it was ruled a suicide by the Army. Now this sparked some controversy because Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, they found the Army's claims to be a little more than suspicious. They didn't believe them because they had just talked to their daughter, you know, days before, and she had never shown any signs of being, you know, suicidal. And the evidence the Army provided was that she was depressed. She had recently had a falling out with a boyfriend. But the issue with this is the evidence they had for her being depressed was that she ate a lot of ice cream in the days before, which sounds ridiculous, it is. And, you know, the evidence suggesting foul play included bruises on her body. She had pools of blood outside the tent. The tent looked like it had been lit on fire with her in it. And the gun that, the bullet wound, it did not match the gun that she had actually owned, nor was the gun that she was found with the gun that was assigned to her. The next one is Private First Class Tina Priest. She was in a very similar situation. She was also stationed in Iraq, but this was 2006, and she was found dead in her room on March 1st. It was also ruled a suicide by the Army. This was also a case of controversy because she had recently reported being sexually assaulted by another male soldier, and her examination had no conclusive results. She was angry, her mother said, but she was never suicidal. And the evidence suggesting foul play was the M16 bullet to the chest. They questioned how she could have done that. She was 5 foot. And she never showed any signs of being suicidal. And not only that, a psychologist in the military actually deemed her stable with no risk management issues. So the biggest problem with these cases is that they were a part of a system that was corrupt in that, you know, it's all about rank. There's a hierarchy in the military that you can't get around that creates a problem for these women, and not just women, but, you know, men too, but mostly women, in the sense that if you're sexually assaulted, they're not going to take you seriously, and the policy is just, they don't cater to preventing this corruption. So this has to do with inconsistency and inefficiency in Sacral policies, and a lack of independence in military investigations. And I'll go more into that here in a minute. Due to a lack of independence in the military investigations and inefficient SAPRO policy, a system of hierarchy is catered to and can only be eliminated through SAPRO reform and civilianizing the MCIO, and I'll get into that as well. Starting off with SAPRO, which is the Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Office, the policies that they have, statistics show, are not as effective as they could be. Brief history, they had started with a series of task forces in order to first recommend a single point of accountability within the Department of Defense for sexual assault. And then the Joint Task Force of Sexual Assault Prevention was created to implement an official sexual assault policy. And thus the SAPRO was born in October of 2005 by the task force. So the Sacral Goals include prevention, victim assistance and advocacy, accountability, investigation, and assessment. Seem all well and good to you? Unfortunately, statistics from sexual assault statistics prove that actually these are not as efficient as they could be. So starting off with prevention, what really sparked interest here for me was that they're trying to foster a culture that prevents sexual assault and prevents retaliation, which is really difficult to do because that seems like a really long-term solution. So is that really going to be preventative? Well, it was found that there was a 40% increase in sexual assault from 2016 to 2018 in the military, which shows that actually these preventive measures are not working. These strategies that they're using are not as efficient. There was also a 50% increase for women specifically in that time. And 1 in 4 women and 1 in 3 men were assaulted by someone in their chain of command, which means that there's definitely a hierarchy problem. This is what really showed me that there is a problem with command and protecting, higher ranks over our women and our men that are in lower ranks. And then 64% of women actually face retaliation after reporting. And this statistic is still alive and well. This was taken from 2018, but it has remained unchanged. And 77% of those face retaliation from someone in their chain of command. Again, the hierarchy is at work here, and how are you going, and obviously the culture changes that they're trying to implement are not as effective. Victim assistance and advocacy, these include just all of your safe helplines and your support systems. And overall, they have actually pretty good support systems because they have to. But 1 in 4 sexual assault victims actually just fear retaliation. They won't report because they fear that they're going to be retaliated against. Now, this fear also carries into, they're just afraid that nothing's gonna happen with their case. And they're going to report it and then it's just going to die, which happens a lot with sexual assault, not just in the military, but as a whole. And then 54% of victims in 2017 reported knowing what resources were available to them. And that seems like, it's a good number that they knew, that 54% knew that they had these resources, but is it enough? More people in the military, more military members should know, more victims should know what resources are available to them to report an act of sexual violence. I put accountability and investigation together because these two really go together very nicely, especially when you look at your statistics. There was a 60% decrease in convictions in unrestricted reports of sexual assault from 2015 to 2018. And what this means is that the 60% decrease, not as many people were getting their justice. Victims were more afraid to report their case. And then only 108 ended in conviction in that time span, which is not a lot. Next is assessment. And this is basically, just data, of course, their data collection of sexual assault so they can improve their policies. However, in the 2019 annual report, they showed a 49% drop in sexual assault from 2014 to 2017. But the problem with this is that the Department of Justice actually did another annual report in that same time span, and it only showed a 0.98% drop in sexual assault nationally, and their statistics also include military sexual assault. So SAPRO, are their goals efficient? Are they working? And the answer is no. They're ineffective, they're inefficient, and they do not eliminate the danger of hierarchy in the military. Many of these men and women still face that problem where they can't report the act of sexual violence done to them because they fear that they're going to lose their job, they're going to be dishonorably discharged. And they're just afraid, and even in cases like Tina Priest, they're afraid that something might physically happen to them. So this goes right into corruption in military investigations. SAPRO and military investigations go hand in hand. And the hierarchy is also seen in the corruption in the military investigations. So I just have a question. How many of you have watched or know of this show? Excellent. Perfect. So this is, so NCIS, that actually stands for the Naval Criminal Investigations, and the NCIO is the Military and Criminal Investigation, basically parent of the NCIS, the CID, and the AFOSI, which is the Air Force. So why does this matter? It's because each of these branches have their own separate policies, and these policies actually, if they're differing too much, they can have more corruption in them that way. There was a Data Span Guard study that compiled a list of 54 Army cases specifically, and mind you, the Army had not had any civilian directors in it yet, unlike the Navy, which has had civilian directors for a long time. And they found that 11% of these cases, they found differences in the Army opinions versus those who knew the deceased, and that includes evidence, kind of like in Lavinia Johnson's case and Tina Priest's. So the hierarchy of ranks is the biggest player here, and that's why that's why there's so much corruption in covering up, sexual assault and covering up murders of our men and women. And it all has to do with the general fear of retaliation, and a lack of accountability, and really a power dynamic. And I know that hierarchy, when you get into hierarchy in the military, it gets really primal, because at that point, hierarchy's been an issue in the military forever, as long as war and violence has been an aspect of human nature, which is forever. And it's about creating the power dynamic in the military. Is about, in wars you see it all starts with, an invasion, and then men subduing women and pillaging women in that area. And that's the way war is, that's the culture of military. So changing the culture of military, it seems nearly impossible. So we need to find preventative measures in order to assist that, instead of trying to change the culture, because how many more of our men and women are we going to allow to either die or be affected by sexual violence before we find effective preventative measures? So the solution, and a little disclaimer, I'm not very qualified to say what a solution would be. In an ideal world, I attempted to contact a JAG lawyer in the military to talk to him about what solutions we can implement to ensure that corruption in military investigations doesn't happen anymore. But I was not able to, but this is what I have. And it's to make military investigation independent by making the MCIO widely civilian-based. And we actually took some steps towards this. The first one is the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act of 2020. If any of you remember Vanessa Guillen, she was bludgeoned to death in the military, and they actually did two things in response to this. And the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act of 2020 actually was it allows for confidential report of sexual abuse and you can report that to someone outside of that person's chain of command. So what this creates is a way for victims to get out of their chain of command, so they're not worried about retaliation or anything like that, which is a huge step in actually making these investigations independent. And second is an addition of a civilian director to the CID specifically. That's specifically Army, and that occurred also in 2020 in response to Vanessa Guillen. And what this does is it again makes it more the MCIO more civilianized and therefore more independent over time. However, the Navy, as I said before, has had a civilian director for many years, and they also still have some of the highest rates of sexual assault. It's the Navy and the Army. So some steps forward would be, I believe, to really make the MCIO widely civilian based. You know, hire more civilians in the MCIO, make the MCIO institutions mostly civilian and not people in the Army. And what this will do is it will take away power from the hierarchy. You know, the higher ranking military personnel won't have the ability, they won't have the opportunity to try to cover up these things and to have that corruption be in there. And then retaliation would no longer be a risk as well. With retaliation no longer being a risk, more reports go up and people are more comfortable in the military, are more comfortable reporting, and there's more accountability. Investigations would be more reliable this way as well, and overall, victims would have a safer environment. So my conclusion, we need to push for better reform. We need to push for reform in SAPRO, and we need to push for a civilian-based MCIO. And with this, we can prevent victim retaliation and victim violence and all of that. And I think if we have to contact our representatives, we have to let them know that this is what needs to happen, because we cannot let any more of our defenders who serve and protect us to face this violence anymore in a system that they chose to be in. Some challenges I faced. This was a whole can of worms. And it's still a very big can of worms that I don't think I scratched the bottom of completely. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that I am a high school student. I'm not necessarily qualified to talk about this, but it's something I'm very, very passionate about, and I feel like all of us should be passionate about, because these are, again, our brothers and sisters. And the challenges I faced there were being so passionate about something like this, and then having it be so big. I think something that's bigger than myself. In the future, I think I would focus on one aspect of it. But overall, it was a whole lot of learning. I learned a lot about how I personally can help with preventative measures and contacting my representatives to advocate for change in the military. So those are my challenges. These are my works cited, and I am open for questions now.
Kind of a mathy question,
yeah,
which is tough for me. Could you go back to the military Department of Justice stats slide?
Right. Oh, I think I actually, did I pass it? No, I don't think I did. Oh, that was it, I think. There we go.
So, if we've recently seen a 40% increase in reporting within the military, and people who reported were even comfortable enough that 64% of them then reported that they'd experienced retaliation, that on the face of it is disturbing, but when the Department of Justice folds all of that into national statistics, it suggests numerically that the military is doing a heck of a lot better than the rest of society.
And see, that is the problem, because the numbers in the military aren't adding up. The issue is, because the issue here was, of course, they were priding themselves on, more reports. I read somewhere that because they had, an increase in reports, and that was also an issue, finding like, is this an increase in reports or is it an increase in sexual assault? But they had actually prided themselves on an increase in reports in that way. I'm not really sure if that answers your question. I'm not sure if I understood it correctly. There was a lot of numbers right there in that one sentence, and I'm like, is there?
How about I ask the real unpopular follow-up question?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that even historically, war has kind of been the pillaging of women,
mm-hmm.
and it's impossible to change this culture.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of tragically seeing that play out in real time over in Ukraine right now. Are we being idealistically naive by trying to integrate genders into the military, given the horrific nature of what war really is?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I'm not sure, and I was thinking about that too. Is putting women in the military, more dangerous, and but I'm not sure how you would go about, are you going to tell women who want to go into the military, no, you can't go into the military now? Are you going to take that away? And I think, I don't know how to answer that, because I don't know. I think it's a good thought. I think it's food for thought. But at this point, changing it, taking women out of the military would be kind of a weird move at this point, because it'd be just kind of a strange move. And I don't think, that's really tough. I'm not sure if I am qualified to answer that, because that's a whole can of worms.
That's a fair answer.
Kind of along that line, there's talk in this area that we're moving more of our functions away from the military. You're blaming the hierarchy as the main source of this, of the problem. Since we are naturally already moving away from the way foreign war is needed to be done by uniformed people, the way we're fighting war now is done way different. Do you think it's going to get better now that we move more of our military apparatus away from the old structure into a civilian world?
I think so. I think making the military less isolated from the rest of society. I think right now, if you are a victim, a sexual assault victim in the military, and all you have is the military to report to, and these same people in this chain of command, I feel like that's really scary, because you never know, are they going to, because I think it's almost a feeling of loneliness, where you have nowhere to go because you're trapped within the walls of this military system. You as a victim don't have a safe space, even though they say it's a safe space. Is it really? Because you look at what happened to Tita Priest. and you're like, is this a really safe space for me to, in this isolated cage, to come forward? So I think integrating military more into just general public, more civilianizing it more. I definitely think that's a good way to go. Did that answer your question? Okay.
I'm going to stop us because we're at time. Okay. Good job.
That are required within the register for the draft.
Sure.
I think they're working on like
I mean, it kind of connects to goals. You train their boys better. Yeah. I feel like you're training them organized. Yeah. How well teach our boys better to respect women. Yeah. And I think that it's interesting because I think Coral also has this about was a big part of always upbringing. That's there's a lot of issues that happen in the world that is really they need to teach young boys and cheerleaders their first work. And maybe some others who might champion that, right?
She's
Yeah, I was looking over at you were like 6 times. And you all the other teachers.
That's our big.
Good.
The microplastics.
Don't.
That's what I'm thinking about. I know. I was like, I thought you were going to start talking about whenever they asked you about like how you implemented it. I thought you were talking about all the plastic I've been hoarding. I think you hoarded them. You have so many. I'm proud of you. You take off. I like them so much. I don't understand why you didn't just use your water bottle. I opened them and then I was like, I have to use this forever. Because I think, like, I do not use, like, plastic water bottles because of the breeze. I think, like, the main time when I use them is, like, at softball or in games when you run out of water in the water bottle and then you have to use one out of the pool. Like, especially in softball because you're outside, there's no water fountains anywhere.
Yeah, I know.
I was like, if microplastics are already in us, and plastic it never decomposes, it never goes away, we're going to continue to build it up.
Okay guys, we're going to get ready for our final presentation today. If I can please request all honors student presenters, I'd like to get a photo at the end of her presentation. So please stay put for a couple minutes after we've completed her presentation. We'll get a picture and then you will be free to go, okay? And once again, cell phones, please make sure those are turned off. And remember that we are live streaming in the back of the room. Okay, our final presentation by Mrs. Oni Sam, The Justice They Deserve.
Woo! There we go! Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Good? Okay. So, my name is Dejona Sam, and this is my presentation, Justice They Deserve. So, with a show of hands, how many of you have heard of the hashtag MMIW movement? Okay, a few of you. Another question, how many of you have seen a post about it on social media and shared it? A little less of you. Okay, there's just a picture. Start off with a little story. So, in the early 1600s, there was a 15-year-old Indigenous girl who was raped, kidnapped, and taken from her home and taken back to England. She was forced to marry an older English man, and really the only thing to know about her is that she was wrongfully taken from her home. We now know this girl to be Pocahontas, and she was the first stolen sister. So is there a solution? So if the media coverage on missing and murdered Indigenous women would increase, then the issue can be seen by those who matter. It's been going on for a long time, and it needs to come to an end. So first I'm going to talk about the non-native influences on Indigenous cultures. So one of the main influences on Indigenous cultures comes from the oil and gas industry. These oil and gas extraction plants bring outsiders onto these reservations, which have been specifically set for Indigenous people. And these cultures in these surrounding areas are being affected because, well, the land is being affected, the wildlife is being affected, and so are their communities. The most troubled area, as I know of, is the Bakken oil producing region, which spans from northwestern North Dakota to northeastern Montana and into southern Saskatchewan. Victimization against Indigenous women in these oil producing regions is 2.5 times higher than that for white Americans. Unfortunately, there have been a few reservations that have been placed on these oil producing regions, on this oil producing region. So in 2019, President Trump signed an executive order which established a task force to help reveal the missing and murdered Indigenous woman crisis, as well as reviewing cold cases that have been not seen in a long time. He stated that it was a tremendous problem and that it's been going on for many, many years, even beyond that. Then, in 2020, Trump wanted to take initiative to lease more onshore oil and gas land. So his need for energy dominance overshadowed his original initiative to help the crisis. So BLM leasing. So BLM was given the power to lease land to oil and gas extraction companies because in 1976 they were mandated by Congress to be in charge of managing, developing, and enhancing all public lands, as long as it deemed beneficial to the environment. They do not take into account the growth in population due to the workers in the industry, nor do they think about the effects that the workers have on its surrounding cultures in these areas. Typically, non-native workers will disrespect the cultures, the laws, the land, and, well, the people. So now I'm going to talk about the shortage of media coverage surrounding missing and murdered Indigenous women. So Jane Bernard and Doreen Hardy were two Indigenous women who were murdered in April of 1966 in Thunder Bay, Canada. They happened at the exact same time, found exact same time. Then a month prior to their murders, Dorothy Lorraine Rivers was murdered as well, same place, also Indigenous. We don't really see much of a difference here. Just going to do a little bit of comparing between the three. Jane Bernard was 43 years old at the time of her murder, And it took longer than her lifetime for the media to interview her family. And it ended with a cold case. Anywho, Dorothy Hardy was 18 years old whenever she was murdered. And it took the media almost 3 times her lifetime to interview her. Dorothy Lorraine Rivers, her age was unknown. She was not identified as Indigenous in the reports when her body was found. And so Ontario, 2 months later, set a $500 reward for anybody who could find any information regarding her body or her murder. What they didn't know, really honestly, helped bring a little bit of justice for her. Dorothy was not identified as Indigenous, and as a result, they took more of an initiative to find more information about her, even setting out a reward to those who could find information. There was not much information that was really uncovered, but the authorities still made the attempt because she was not described as Indigenous when she was found. So some shortcomings in my research were that I'm half Navajo, and it's really difficult for me to read research and cases like these because a lot of them involve women being assaulted and murdered in like very grotesque ways. And it was really hard for me to find a solution that I could actually physically help the movement or any kind of way besides spreading awareness and doing this presentation for all of you. So my mission was to do this presentation is to spread awareness to every single person in this room so that the movement and the issue can be noticed. Everybody has to become aware of this issue. It's not a me problem, it's a we problem. So this project gave me the opportunity to reflect on my connection with my culture, my people, as well as other Indigenous cultures. And it allowed me to see that although other people will not always have respect for other cultures, I always will, and I always want to spread that you should respect other cultures. And it's always been treat others how you want to be treated until they don't have the same skin color as you. Am I more excited? Questions?
You mentioned that the one who was not identified as Indigenous got a more rapid response, but more media coverage. Did your research touch upon what's sometimes referred to as missing white woman syndrome, where the media will just pounce on certain missing cases more than others?
Yes, I did look into that just a little bit. I didn't go into that completely. I did glance at a few research about that, but I did notice that yes, there is more initiative taken whenever a white woman goes missing. You see it all over the news, you see it on national news, everything like that. But when, an Indigenous woman or any woman of any other kind of ethnicity goes missing, there's not as much of an initiative to look for them or look for any information regarding them.
You talked about the non-Indigenous people coming to reservations for work. And did you look at the difficulties or the complexities around investigation and prosecution of crimes committed by non-tribal members on tribal land? And could you speak to that a little bit if you have knowledge?
Yes. So non-native perpetrators who commit crimes on tribal lands, the tribal government is not given jurisdiction over non-native perpetrators. They're only given jurisdiction on cases that involve a native victim and a native perpetrator.
And how does that complicate this issue?
That really complicates things because tribal governments are seeing the issue, but they can't get the justice the women deserve because they aren't given the jurisdiction over those individuals who are causing the problem.
I
I don't know, but did you have a number in there of how many crimes, of the percentage of these horrendous crimes being committed by non-tribal members versus tribal members? I don't know if I saw any data on that.
I did not include that, but
Yeah, I mean, you seem to be implying that a lot of it is non-tribal members coming in.
yeah, so I couldn't find a lot of research or statistics on that, but I was reading a lot of articles, and I noticed that almost all Native women who have been assaulted or attacked in any kind of way have always identified at least one non-Native perpetrator.
Okay, audience?
Yes. So you mentioned that once the tribal officers, it's out of their jurisdiction, who takes over that jurisdiction after that?
The federal government takes over that jurisdiction, and usually they've got other things to do. They've got other things to worry about, which is why usually these cases aren't seen or processed in any way, because the federal government is kind of just sweeping it under the rug because they've got other things to worry about.
Well, I'm going to kind of add on to Tracy's question earlier. I know that the most recent thing that I can really think of where a white woman got like a ton of attention was the Gabby Petito case. And she was like, her body was found on a national park and on land or whatever. But her case got so much attention immediately. But shortly after her case, the movement for missing and murdered Indigenous women, they were like, hey, we're here too. Like, they used Gabby Petito's case as, they kind of piggybacked on it to get more attention. Like, they told people, you're only focusing on this because it's a white woman. Focus on us too. So do you think that in a way, like somehow all the attention, that even though it's going to white people, attention is still good attention and
Yes.
is still helping?
Oh yes, of course, absolutely. I think that any kind of attention brought onto this is good attention because it needs to be known. And it doesn't really matter, as people say, all press is good press.
Mm-hmm.
Any more questions?
Go ahead.
I was just wondering that if you looked into like the other way around, because I've seen cases where if it's an Indigenous person assaulting a white person, that case gets a lot of attention too because of the racism surrounding it. Do you happen to look into that at all with these oil fields?
I did not look into that quite, but I did notice that most of the workers on the oil field were not typically Native, but I didn't really look into that, no.
I saw that the MMIW was doing a run recently through our area. Did you happen to connect with anybody there?
No, I was going to talk to some more people in our area, but I just didn't have enough time to really connect with a lot of people. Just because I know that a lot of people in this area don't really know a lot about this information, so I wasn't sure really where to ask around or anything like that.
Okay. Good job. Okay, committee members, please fill out your rubrics. Lunch should be arriving in about 15 minutes. So we will have lunch and then we will figure out who our scholarship winner is. And the rest of you honors diploma presenters, let's just come on up here and I'll get your picture.
I have mixed feelings about
Why would we stay here?
Don't get me wrong, I love it when they say that. I tried to keep it in. She was too I like those.
Yeah. I tried calling Scapula the other day to see about getting someone to come out. No one ever called me back. Do you have like a card for your dad?
What number is it?
I don't know. I mean, I can look it up.
I can get it. I can get a card.
You can get a card. Give him my number. Your mic is so bad. And tell him I'm trying to get
I did that to them. That was my fault.
Duncan over there like, I'm sorry, I'm going this way.
Yeah, Duncan. No, that's not the number you should get. I want to buy my phone. Yeah, baby. I know, that's why I'm still. But just write a text to your dad. And then tell him, hey, this is.
Any parents won't let go for it. Okay?
Hold on, we need another one.
We are?
Come here.
Let's go to my note. You can do it.
So, here, let me just.
Oh! One.
Yeah, I just Googled it because they didn't really have like a proper website.
Yeah.
And I just found a number, and I think it was the guy in Lorraine, like the head guy.
Yeah.
That I just left a voicemail.
He's
and
usually on vacation a lot, so.
Maybe that's why.
Yeah, because there was. I think usually what he does is like someone says something and then he gives the person their card. Or
Right,
whatever,
right,
so
yeah.
I'll get you his card too.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool. Thank you.
yeah, cool.
Sorry.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, really good.
You guys are free. Good job.
Yeah, I noticed, I was like, I saw you in the front, and I was like, oh yeah, he's crazy. And then I was watching these presents.
You're not going to sit
Oh, no. Now I just got AP test.
So I want to go over some stuff. Your stuff, like what's that your stuff? Oh, check this one. Yeah, can we have you on?
What?
One thing that sorry, I just but we might have to just like add it in. It's like a weird scholarship that never happened.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I want to learn. You know, so you put in your deposit, you can right? And you should check with them that they have all that chapter like stuff. And they probably do. And ask when you're going to get your award. Right? Because that's going to be telling you how much you need.
I hope so. She needed it.
And that need is what
I'm taking
Sorry, you go.
I think I need to, I know I need to finish my college and stuff.
Yeah. Often you have to put some on the book. Yeah. Cool. Okay. I'll keep following up with you. Yeah.
Maybe. I know. I mean, it's like you guys are always good.
There's calculus and water.
That's a funky question.
And then more of a question about how does stress connect to my first thought was you that you guys are doing all these things, but I don't know that it actually makes you less stressed to do theater and band and constantly traveling. Yeah. Cookie time. Yeah, focus. Right. I think sometimes stress is also connected to like stepping out of yourself and looking at all the things you have to do. Whereas like if you're on stage, you're focused on that thing, not on the fact that you've got something else to do. Right. So you're laser focused on the thing you're into, as opposed to all the things. All of the is kind of like stepping back and that.
have no right to say like, hey, that's what
you gotta be able to just like focus it out. That's why I talk about doing lists. You don't have anybody just put the list aside, pick one thing and try to focus, and then all the list stuff can find this aside. You all right? Yeah. I wanna. You going to frisbee golf thing? Yeah. Cora was saying she's doing that too.
No, actually, because
I think she was saying that.
Because it's not.
Yeah. I like frisbee golf. I used to play.
See, the thing is, you're wrong.
I want to try to. I want to make sure that you are noting all the different, like the parents' scholarships, all the different scholarships that are going to you. I want to get them put into like your portfolio page. Not just the ones that are outside of the school, right? Like the institutional ones I want to put into. So if you know of all those, I got Johnny
How are you supposed to not answer a question like that? Like, how do you really polite?
Sydney art,
Like, what he was saying.
It's a bag of nothing to do with me.
Yeah, and you know, that's. I'm mentally ill, so of course just because you can.
Just because I can.
I see they have them off. Yeah. That's because the entire soldier is based on a hierarchy. Like I've been seeing, I mean, like how the women are really real.
I think so. Yeah. I think it's part of the
two men talking about
if it were
well, that's what it used to be. It used to be a punishment, and it used to be not so like obviously it's not part of the matter now, but back then it was normal. It should be. Is not literally like men used to be entitled to whatever they want. They still. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, I'm learning so much.
They are! And they're like blowing up buildings. So if you have like a group of people who are breaking people and blowing up buildings,
get to
maybe come back.
keep advocating for all
But see, that's.
I'm sure you do. I've seen you run.
Gonna do
I've seen you run from first to second to third.
Yeah, but that's like going to try. It would take because you just try to do it. I don't know what you're trying to say, but that's why we need effective preventative
Because you're quick.
Yeah. Because there are still that many.
Yeah.
Go.
I didn't think I would listen to when I was your age either, but for a good cause, you might.
Maybe.
And it helps with the awareness, kind of like spread the word. I think it's cool how everybody here is becoming advocates.
Getting them in trouble. I feel like getting them in trouble.
Gives us hope.
Kind of like not the law. Especially when you have these people with these
Okay. I want to chat with you too, one-on-one sometimes.
like if
Okay.
sounds good.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Good job.
That's not even a joke, and they were like, "That's not a sign of something sensory." She so
like that's how she beats herself
like she tried to get herself on. She put out
with a gun that like wasn't even.
It wasn't hers. Yeah. Okay, I found out that Stanford with the crime scene, she wasn't found like this. They like said, we found the gun like leaning on her, and then we moved it because we are in the military. It's not like we know not to tamper with crime scenes. And that's the whole thing. Like I feel like military personnel already feel like they're better than.
They shouldn't be allowed to investigate their own cases.
Absolutely.
They should not be allowed to go and find their own troops and investigate their own troops that they already hold grudges against.
That would be like the police department investigating. They do their own corruption. So they do that.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, absolutely.
Literally.
This is why there should be special task force for investigating things that happen inside of these hierarchies.
Well, and see, it's not just about finding, because that's what they have, is the MCIO is military specific. The only issue is that is the issue. It's like a whole isolated cage of infestation of corruption.
And like it should be a safe place, but how are you gonna go to like the person who is like the same rank as the person who like raped you and report it? Because like obviously they're gonna take a side.
And that happens. But of course not take like the degree that happens in the military because like I already do that.
And people still think that women shouldn't be in the military. So how are we supposed to just go about saying how are we supposed to try and start changing how women are treated in the military when people still don't even think women should be in the military?
Like that is the first issue we need to address.
Yeah.
Like baby steps.
Are we being naive? Giving women rights.
I don't think we're actually.
I know, but I just
I
still
think he
it
definitely
was not
devil's advocate.
It pisses me off. I don't like when people do that. Ask me what you really think. You know?
Like that's. I feel like my hair.
So I wanted to touch you, but like I didn't want to touch your head.
All right, we'll see you guys. It was well done.
I think they said this on the I think they did. I'm pretty sure.
On the site.
I'm not. Let me confirm that.
Just a half-day stuff.
Let me confirm that because I'm pretty sure.
Fortunately, my plans are on my desk and include the second half.
Yeah, mine do too.
For a giant disclaimer that says I came back at 3 to June,
But yeah, I'm not really sure. I will have to find out before I give you any real information on that.
Let me check with.
Yeah, Sonia. Sonia will know.
Switching board right here.
Oh, there's Kim right over there? We are real.
So I think the plastic was fair, and because we've got a generic birthday people and lots of random assorted tangers over here, and I think the plastic Yes.
You never know how long it'll take. You never know if we're going to go over. It just doesn't. Yeah. Oh, okay. They don't have to. This is just for us today.
I was gonna say, someone told them to get out.
No, she said you're free.
No. Okay. I like that skirt, it's really pretty.